von Seggern still. You can hear me well? Okay, great, thanks. So this is, happy to have you here. Hello, welcome to a session about email archival, and title is Email Archival as a PDF. How does that make sense? And what I like about the title, you can spell it, how does that make sense? So what is this kind of a strange idea of, or how does that actually make sense to do that? So, and I'd like to cover or answer both of these questions. But mostly, I will not be able to provide you with then the ultimate solution to email archival. It's more, I'm raising questions, so basically two questions. The first one is, what would actually be the ideal way to archive email? And the next question then is, if we think about archiving email in PDF, does that solve actually any issues? And if so, which ones? And if we would do so, archive email as PDF, in which way we should actually do so? So these are the two questions. First, a short introduction into the topic. So we all know, I mean, in my business life, I would say per day, 70% of my time I'm doing email. So we are a rather small company in Germany. As I said yesterday, we have worldwide customers. So most of my day-to-day work is happening with my email client, communicating with customers, other organizations. So probably, 70% of my days are doing email. And we all know when we do that, when we do come to agreements, exchange our opinions with other companies, we actually doing business with them, and then we creating business records. We're doing that with email. So, and then we are obliged by our, at least we in Germany are, and I have heard and know that it's not different here in America and probably in most, at least developed countries with organizations, you are obliged to archive what you do, so that when any authority wants to find out what you have been doing and why you felt that you can do certain things, then you have to prove it, and then you are obliged to have an archive where you can look up what you have done. So you're responsible for that. And also, of course, for your own records, you want to find out, maybe I, at one point, want to leave Callas software, and then I have a successor, and then he wants to find out what has happening. Why does this guy has happened to do such thing and this and that way? And so he needs to look up what I have been doing in an archive form of my business communication. And then email is digital, so it's digitally born. So in a way, it's much easier than paper to archive, because at least if you have a digital archive, so we might first think, okay, but then it's fairly easy. We just put the email into the archive and we are done. But honestly, if we are looking in most of the companies as of today, there is not really an organized archival of email. So it happens somehow that an email server is connected to an archive, and once in a while everything is copied from there. But it's not like a very well-designed system to archive email. So and that is kind of strange, because email is actually natively born, and it's also a very important part of business communication, as I've said. So the question is, why is there, I feel, a strange gap between business communication in reality and our archives? So, and then question is, how could we possibly overcome this gap? And then, therefore, I think first we may have to better understand what email actually is. And when looking at it, what we see is email is not, as I have indicated in my previous slides, email is digitally born, yes, but email is not a file. Email is rather a system of components working together in order to facilitate communication. So on a technical level, what happens, I'm writing an email in my client, then the SMTP protocol is used from my email client to transmit the email to an email server relay. Then from there it goes to the internet, from one email relay to the next email relay, until it ultimately gets to the recipient's email server, and then the email client of the recipient connects to the email server not with SMTP in this case, but with either POP3 or IMAP to actually read the email. And with POP3, he would download the email from the server, meaning the copy of records is, after that process, on the email client, while the copy remains on the server with IMAP. So this is a process that is happening, and if we think about this process in terms of archiving, we would actually have to archive the whole system. So in an ideal world, we would archive the email client at the upper left here, the mailbox, the sent mailbox of that email client, and the inbox of the other email client, and we would have two archives that are again connected to each other in interoperable ways, so that we can reconstruct the email communication that has taken place. So that would be ideal in the future, to find out what was actually happening there. Maybe there was a communication problem. Technically, then we would be able to find out. But obviously, this is nothing we can easily achieve. So this is maybe from a purely archivist standpoint, that would be ideal. So for a person who only thinks about archiving, that would be the really good solution. However, this is not practically possible. So we only can archive files, or we can archive mailboxes, but we are not in a situation where we can create interoperable archives. So then the question next is, okay, if we can't do that, what else can we do? And that is a question then, what is actually the record of copy? What is the record that we should archive if we can't get the ideal solution? So what is the next solution to the ideal solution? Would we want to archive the email as it was composed and sent, or rather the email from the recipient's email system? Would we rather archive the email from the email server or the email from the email client? So this is again a difficult question to answer. So in answer to and in order to find out more there, I think we should some more time look into technical details here. So this is question then, how does this work on a lower level of communication? So what actually is email? I've said we have SMTP, which is a protocol, and here on the left-hand side, you can compare the SMTP thing with an envelope around a letter. So that has the address of the email, so where it goes to, where it has been sent from, when it was received, the return path, and it has the actual data. And the actual data is the email file. What is important to understand here is that the email file is not, so I have in the email file, I have the header information, where does it come from, where does it go to, and also tracing information, but that information is only recorded information. It's not used for actually routing the email through the email system. So these are two different parts of the communication. So this is the envelope, and that is not the same, not necessarily the same. Usually it's the same, but not necessarily the same as the header information. Because the header information is more like logging information about what has happened. And therefore, for instance, when you send an email with a blind carbon copy call via SMTP, in the SMTP protocol, you would see the blind carbon copy recipient, but you wouldn't see that in the header file of the email itself, because the very reason why you used blind carbon copy was that all the other recipients of the email are not able to see who else has received that email. So you can see that the SMTP is in fact really different. The SMTP information is in fact really different from the header information of the email when looking at these BCC entries. And in addition to that, which also complicates the situation of an email, is you might have just one body, which might be and was when email was originally designed always just ASCII text, no German umlauts or other, just ASCII. But you can also have other parts there. So you can also have RTF formatted text, and you could also have HTML. You can have either of them, or you can have several such bodies of an email. So you could have several different parts of information in an email, and there is no guarantee that they actually match. So in the body, you would have the text either formatted as ASCII, RTF, or HTML. And you might have several bodies, and then you could even also have attachments. Yeah, so far about technicalities about email, and that is what I have already said. So SMTP and email file are two different things. And of course, if we think about archiving the whole thing, that is important. We have two sets of information here that typically are the same, but not necessarily. So if my email server is just not working correctly, it could enter information into the header file of it, and we all see that when we receive spam. So usually in a spam file, the from email address is different from the real email address. So the sender email has used a system that allowed the spammer to insert information into the header that was not the real information, because it was cheating the system by simply putting information into the header that was not used in the SMTP. So two different sources of information here, which is not good when it comes to archiving. Okay, so but still, I mean, the question remains: there is something that we want to archive. So what actually is then the email file format? We can't obviously archive the SMTP information. We can only archive the email file format, and we ignore spam for now. So what then is the email format? So we have to look into what has been written down, and in the internet community, RFCs, requests for comment documents, are used to standardize things, and then there is RFC number 5322, which basically defines email as we use it today. And when we look into that, we see, okay, what's defined there is communication. So it's defining a communication protocol, but it doesn't define format. So it defines what they call the internet message format, and that is the body information of my email that is being passed from one email server to the other until it ultimately arrives at the recipient's email client. However, the RFC 5322 doesn't say anything about what file format has to be saved on disk. So whenever an email server wants to save something on disk, the server can do what it wants. So there is a similar file format to the internet message format, which is usually called EML, and that is also used by some email servers, but that is not standardized. So the email server can basically do what it wants, and yeah. So we don't really have a format that where we could say this is the format that we want to archive. When we're looking at the client, so it's even more difficult because, as I've said, on the client side, that basically gives the recipient access to the email server. We have two different protocols, IMAP and POP3, which work differently. So then we would have to decide whether we archive what is on the email server or what is on the email client. And then when we look at the email client, we see all the different email clients. And Outlook would save its email files in a different format. Usually they use a PST mailbox, and when they export an email to the file system, they use MSG, which is kind of documented by Microsoft, but in our own implementation, we found out that documentation here is different from implementation. So you actually have to reverse engineer the format in order to actually understand it. Not a good thing when you thinking about archives. So it's really problematic. What you can say is EML is kind of so you could distill a commonly used variant of EML and say, okay, this is my file of records. This would be the file that I want to archive. But this is not fully standardized, so not really a good situation for archive, because then you would have to make sure in an archive that you always have a program that can display this EML format. And then finally, we arrive at attachments. So we have seen that it could be possible to distill an email format. And when looking at something from an archivist standpoint, it's always good to have only one format for a file type, so that you can concentrate on archiving one program that allows you to access the data in that file. But when it comes to attachments, we all know, I mean, that can be everything. So that can be an Office file, that can be even an executable, it can be a zip container. So this just opens again the whole world of problems when it comes to archiving file formats. In addition to that, it's not easy from an email file, from an EML file, to see what attachments. So some systems would encode the attachment within the EML file. Others would keep the attachment separately as only reference from the EML file. So this is yet another very problematic situation. And then there is yet another problem here, references. So I have an HTML formatted email with a reference to an image. Usually these images are not embedded into the email file, rather they sit somewhere in the internet. There is only a link to there. So how do we deal with these images? Because when we archive the email, then there is obviously no guarantee that when this email is opened later on from the archive, that the image still exists there. So we finally arrived at kind of a problem statement when it comes to email archiving. So first of all, we can't archive the email system as such. We can only archive files. And it's not fully clear what to archive. So there is EML, which seems to be the best format that we can use, but there is not really a standard. So it's definitely not standardized by the communication protocols for email that are standardized. And we have, in addition, the problem with attachments or formatted emails or different bodies that exist at the same time in the same email. So, okay, that was raising questions, actually. So how should an ideal archival of email look like? So what now when we look at the whole thing from a PDF perspective? So this is a summary what I have said. So we are talking about the header in an email file. We are talking about the body of the email file, which could be just ASCII or ASCII and RTF or ASCII and RTF and HTML, and there is no guarantee that these different variants are having the same content part. So sometimes you all may have seen an email where you have in the text just in order, if you can't see this email properly, just click here. That means in the email probably there was HTML. The client was not able to display that, so he has fallen back to a different text, different body, and that was then pure text. Obviously, you don't want to have that when you get an email out of your archive. You don't want to see a click here if this email is not properly displayed. And then, again, that was a body, and then we have all the other problems with attachments. It's easy. First of all, most email clients allow you to export to PDF. So getting from email to PDF would be easy. However, this is mostly not complete. So you more or less get what you would get if you print the PDF to print the email to PDF. It's incomplete and mostly only converts the body of the email, not the header. So how would a better way to email as PDF look like? To archive email as PDF look like? So let's look at the different parts of an email. First, we have the header. And there I'd say, okay, PDF has an extensible and rich way to embed metadata. Header information is the metadata that comes with an email. So a good email archival system in PDF would simply put all the header fields into the XMP metadata platform of our archival PDF file. And when we're talking PDF, so I don't want to discuss PDF-A at length here, but PDF-A is an ISO standard for archival of PDF, so we should consider to use PDF-A here. And then we would have to, because this is just a requirement of PDF-A, we would have to have an extension schema for our metadata. But that is doable, so this is not a problem that can't be solved. So you can do that. You would just add all that header information into the metadata of the PDF file, and you would also, as shown here, have the most important header fields. Where does this email come from, to whom has it been sent, on what date, and so forth. You would also display that on the front page of the PDF file. Body, for the actual payload of the email file, you would have to decide whether you use, if there are several variants, if there is text, RTF, and HTML, you would have to decide which one to use. Of course, you could also archive everything, but usually the best way would be to use the text that has been used by the client, and that usually is the richest variant. So if all three of them are present, you would usually use HTML. If the HTML references images, external images, you would have to decide. I mean, you can decide to skip all of these images just in order to save space, but usually the recommendation is to insert all these images into the archived email. For HTML, you have to be careful with page breaks, which are not encoded in HTML, so you have to do some intelligent way here of converting, and then the recommendation is to also embed, and as you can do with PDF A3, you can embed any file, so the recommendation is to also embed the original email file as MSG or EML, so that you can even open it in your email client as long as this email client still is able to deal with that file format. For email attachments, I mean, PDF-A already is a solution for most of the archives to archive in this standardized format. So for the attachments, recommendation would be to convert them to PDF-A, to have an archivist's file, and then embed them into the archived email, archived as PDF email as an attachment, as you can easily do. And then you would create file links to the attachments, as we have seen here in this conference before. You would have these links so that you can easily click on the file link here to open it in whatever application. So might be an obvious question here is I'm recommending putting lots of stuff into the PDF file. Doesn't this create really big files for my archive? So I have looked a little bit into that. So first of all, email, as I've said, there is no standardized email format. MSG from Microsoft is a binary format, while EML is a variant of XML. And XML, I only have ASCII. That means any binary data has to be ASCII encoded, and that makes the file bigger. So if I would use the most commonly used email format, EML, I would end up with rather big files, at least if I have binary attachments. That is different for PDF. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So instead of making the attachments bigger, it would compress them as good as possible using zip compression. So in fact, it's trade-off between making bigger and making smaller. However, we have to say if we want to use PDF-A, we have to embed all fonts, and we also have to use ICC profile, which again makes the file bigger. So just in order to say something more concrete here, I made some personal statistics. So for a regular text email, just ASCII text, PDF-A was in my test just about double the size. With binary attachments, it was actually almost the same, because as I've said, on the one hand side, you have PDF with embedded fonts, with ICC profiles that weren't in the EML file. But on the other hand, you have the compression of PDF. So it's a trade-off, and it almost leveled. With HTML emails, I ended up with much bigger files in my PDF, but that was always related to referenced images. And these referenced images are making the file, of course, much bigger, but there is no rule or result that I could give, because that very much just depends on the number of images and their size that were referenced. So far, I mean, that was what I wanted to say, email to PDF. One outlook, what I think is not sufficiently addressed at all is retrieval. So if I would put my if I would, as I've said, all my emails as PDF-A files into my archive. There is no good way to retrieve data files from the archive. So I would like to see better search. So, for instance, I would want to search for, and it happened to me in the past. So I knew I had discussed something with a couple of people. It must have been 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I was involved, and 2 colleagues of my company, and also Matthew from Adobe. So now show me the email client, whatever solution that would find me these email threads. So I think there is room for improvements. Yeah. Okay, let's look back at the problem statement that I had. I think I have to be short now. Yeah. So the file format issues can be resolved with PDF. What we can't resolve is the problem of the email system as such that can't be archived. So conclusion, PDF-A can in fact help us when archiving our business communication and email. It can convert emails to PDF-A, keeping the look and feel of the email client. It can convert all the attachments. PDF-A3 seems to be an ideal solution, and header information can be maintained in the PDF metadata. Yeah, so PDF-A attachments allow us to address the problems of attachments. And yeah, this is the way that we can do today to save or to archive as much information as we can, so that we are prepared, or that we can prepare our future improved retrieval systems to have as much information as possible for them to build their retrieval systems. And that was my presentation. Thank you very much for being here with me, and I'm open for questions.
So in this scenario, to create these PDF A's, you'd have to do a lot of manual work, wouldn't you?
No. I mean, not necessarily. You could, but I mean, there are systems that can, yeah, you just put in your mailbox files, and then they are converted to PDF-A, and you can deal with, you can say, okay, all attachments in Excel convert to PDF and keep the Excel file, but all attachments in Word just convert to PDF-A, whatever. So you can set up those rules. So it's not manual, no. Other questions? Yes?
I'm not completely clear on, are you storing one email message as one PDF and then having like a collection of the emails then?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Question, how big do these archives get? And again, do you run into the limit of the maximum PDF size when you do these archives?
Yeah, as I've said, I mean, it depends on what kind of email you have. So if it's just text, it would double the size just because you have to embed the fonts, ICC profiles. And for HTML emails, if you decide to only archive what was in the email body, then you're pretty much the same. But if you archive the images that were referenced from the HTML, you would end up with much bigger files.